I have tried some of that stuff. It's usually like your transitions. It's a 5-minute story, I'll tell you. Yeah. Appreciate it. I had like 4 years. Still working. Just one clarification. Yeah.
Call to order the meeting for Monday, May 16, 2022. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up first is the approval of the memorandum of the May 2nd, 2022 regular town council meeting. I believe we've all seen those and those have been posted. Are there any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
First by Councilor Garrett. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is claims. Councilors, you'll notice that we moved this up to accommodate the finance department so that they don't have to sit through all of our meetings for its entirety. Certainly if there will be finance questions and concerns in meetings, we would obviously request the finance department stick around for those in future meetings. But any questions for claims? I'll make a motion to approve claims. Second by Councilor Traylor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a request to speak on agenda items. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we have no request to speak.
Very good. Up next will be the mayor administration update. Welcome, Mayor.
Good morning. Thank you. I want to welcome Noblesville Mayor Chris Jensen, who is joining us this morning to discuss an item on your agenda, which is the adoption of a Central Indiana Regional Development Authority, for which Zionsville will be a participant in. As you know, Mayor Hawk initially joined a group of Central Indiana mayors or elected officials to discuss executive level opportunities and challenges in our region. I continued this upon entering office. This long-term collaboration made our CI CEO a natural fit for pursuing Ready Grant dollars administered by the state. Mayor Jensen forwarded to the group a one-page fact sheet explaining the Central Indiana Regional Development Authority, its purpose, and benefits, as well as the state statute that supports this ordinance. Zionsville initially requested $2.7 million through this process. However, the total requests for the region exceeded the dollars available. Once we create the RDA, we will have a better sense of which projects align with various funding sources and the governor's priorities. I look forward to announcing when the final amount is determined. We are excited to share with you Zionsville Park's Carpenter Nature Preserve Master Plan presentation. Jared will walk us through this plan later in the morning's meeting. I have heard from many of you over the past year since we launched this effort, and I'm so grateful to this council for your support of the Carpenter Nature Preserve. I believe our community is going to love what they see in this morning's presentation. The Boone County Justice Commission report was released on May 6th. The commission's recommendation is that the jail project, as proposed by the county commissioners, is not what is needed in Boone County. Any future recommendation must decrease the costs and scope to meet the current and future needs of the Boone County inmate and community corrections population. We will share this report with you via email and place it on the town's website for the community's review. While this decision is not in our purview specifically, it would impact our taxpayers, and I am hopeful you will see that the proposed project is not fiscally responsible or what our county needs at this time. We have lost a great leader on our team. Wayne DeLong has submitted his resignation, and our community and economic development team, as well as the leadership team, is sad to see him leave. He has built an amazing team, and we are all going to miss him and his leadership. Today, the town of Zionsville averages 1,000 hits per day on our commercial lending page, and the average length of time for those hits is a minute, which is significant when you're talking about cruising through, your news feed. And Wayne and his team have worked diligently and successfully to build that interest over the past several years. Finally, I want to share with you some information we've learned with regard to lit distributions. They remain below last year, largely due to the impact of the pandemic and the reserve amounts the state maintains to protect against major recessionary effects. Generally, lit revenues have a delay to them. So 2022 is seeing the effects of income tax receipts from 2020 during the initial shutdowns. We anticipate the revenues to bounce back for 2023, just as employment did during that time period. Additionally, lit revenues are not based upon actuals for each city and town. They are collected by county and then allocated based upon the levy to the corresponding units within the county. So we are dependent upon the economy of Boone County instead of just the economic effects within Zionsville. We have compared the total lit distributions for neighboring counties, and it looks like both Howard and Boone have had the largest negative effect in total lit between 2021 and 2022, with Hamilton also seeing a negative effect. Both Hendricks and Clinton have seen slight increases in lit dollars over the past 2 years. So what this means in totality is that for Zionsville and Boone County, we're in 2021, those lit distributions were $16.5 million roughly. In 2022, they're projected at $15.5 million, resulting in a 6% decrease or $1 million. I received this information and late last week and wanted to make sure I shared it with you as soon as I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I had a couple quick questions. So thinking about finances, you answered the question which I was going to have, which was how granular does it get? So there's no real true up happens, because I suspect other parts of Boone County contributed more to that decline than Zionsville, where I think most folks were able to work from home, but their decline is our decline.
Yeah.
Do we know yet of that 6% of that $1 million, what proportion of it is ours and what impact that will have on the budget yet? I don't
know that question. And I will say that I do believe that many of the financial and efforts that are being made at the state level are working to, in totality, address the issues of COVID. And so when you look at the opportunities that we have with the READY grant, and that I'm hopeful for other supplemental revenue that may come down after this first distribution, it will help to try to mitigate some of that lost revenue.
Do you know the timing? You mentioned you're looking forward to telling us when you know the amount. Do you know roughly the timing, or is that just?
I don't know.
Okay.
And it's not because someone else smarter than me doesn't know. It's just that I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Last meeting you were at, we talked about the finance system. There were a couple questions that you said you would look into. One was if we were still paying the full monthly service fees for the system, even if it's yet to be implemented. Do you know that answer yet by chance?
No, and I really would like to pull together information and discuss some of these issues in executive session, as we discussed before, just so that we can maintain the information we need in a confidential way, given the potential for litigation.
Got it. Last, I want to thank you for supporting us and supporting Graham Rahal Performance going through the RDC process, at least going into the negotiation process. I know they haven't done that, but I know that was something that was important to a lot of the counselors. So I appreciated you coming to that last RDC meeting and speaking. I know Jason spoke, I spoke, Brian's spoken. So it was good to have alignment on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Up next is old business, and we have no old business, so we'll move on to new business. Up first is the Carpenter Nature Preserve Master Plan presentation. I believe, Jared, you're going to present this, and is it Tricia also?
Yes, as well as Sam from Dell Architects.
Very good.
Good morning, councilors. Last fall, with an additional appropriation, the Zionsville Parks Department began the master planning for the Carpenter Nature Preserve. The Carpenter Nature Preserve is 215 acres in northern rural Zionsville that was purchased by Jim and Nancy Carpenter with the idea to preserve this and create a public park. So we entered into the master planning with them, identified what the mission and the inspiration behind this section of land would be, and then opened it up to public discussion and had a robust community engagement process, which we'll talk in full detail today. So I just wanted to let you know kind of everything that came out of that plan and how we intend to move forward. So with no further ado, I'll introduce Tricia of Runsdale, Ernstberger and Associates.
Thank you for having us here this morning. Just want to give you a quick run through of the master plan. My computer will work. So it was a 4-phase process that we went through. We utilized a charrette process to kind of condense the timeline. And what the charrette was a 3-day session where we had a full day, and I think it bled over even into the next day, and talked to a variety of stakeholders and focus groups. I know a few of you were a part of those discussions. From that, we developed the vision and the goals, like Jared said, and some conceptual layouts. Before the charrette, we did have an intense inventory process, which included an ecological assessment done by Ecologic. He spent about a week out there on the site doing a very intense, detailed look of the habitat and the ecological conditions of the site. We also looked at slopes, we looked at vegetation, we looked at floodplain, just getting a good handle on the site and what's out there. From that came a proposed restoration plant communities plan. And I put emphasis on this because it did drive the master plan. It really did drive the layout. This is a preserve, a nature preserve. So establishing habitats and ecological systems is important. So this really was a guiding factor for the master plan itself. And now I'll turn it over to Sam. They did an assessment of the existing buildings that are out there on the site, the clubhouse and then the bunkhouse.
Good morning. So there are 2 existing structures on the site. One is the old clubhouse. It's about 9,000 square feet. One is the old bunkhouse that is about 4,000 square feet. So we went through and did an objective facilities assessment, really just to test the feasibility if any of this existing stock would be appropriate to rehabilitate and reuse as the nature center. So both structures we believe were built in the early to mid 1980s of a residential level construction. And what we did in digging further is really just understand some of the opportunities and constraints that renovating these buildings would offer. The opportunities are that it's sited really well on the property, on a bluff with great views. And the clubhouse really is appropriately sized at about 9,000 square feet for a nature center program. Some of the constraints that renovation would present to us are that really the structural system is in poor condition. There's a lot of moisture issues, infiltration into the basement, as well as mold issues. When the buildings were abandoned, they were stripped of their mechanical and electrical systems. So there's a large upfront cost to bring those back up to working order, as well as you can see in some of these pictures, structural deficiencies. As I said, it was built to a kind of a low quality residential standard and to be used by the public. Essentially all of the structure would need to be reinforced and doubled up, adding in new joists and ceiling and columns and beams in the basement. So a lot of pretty significant challenges to reusing the existing structure. Hand it back over to Tricia here to talk about some of the themes that we heard from the community and during the charrette process.
So these were those recurring themes that we heard, bring people and nature together. So balancing the need to inspire and attract people, but also the need to protect and preserve the site for habitat. that it would be a nature preserve with an emphasis on Eagle Creek ecosystem. So ecological programming, habitat creation, and restoration strategy for Eagle Creek. Create dedicated and protected habitat areas. Again, we want to get people out there, but we also want this to be a nature preserve for animals. Light footprint, so low impact, sustainable and resilient design approach. Again, nature preserve. Prairie forest, woodland, stream habitats. That those are interpretive themes for trails, art, activities, and then programming too. And the nature center should be adaptable. So not just a nature center for nature education and programming, but also park community center, which led directly into the looking at the space planning for the nature center itself. It was also important, since this is a nature preserve and not, just a traditional recreational park, to what we don't want. We took the time to outline things that would be detrimental to what we want with this master plan. So equestrian trails, mountain bike trails, sports ball fields, live music, lighting, bright lighting, greenhouse, community gardens. A lot of those have a much heavier footprint on the land. So you can understand why those were identified, that we didn't want those. From all of that, what really rose to the top was this as the vision, the mission for the park. So it needs to inspire, attract, and preserve. One of the things that was mentioned early on was this needs to be a place that will, of course, nature lovers are automatically going to be drawn to it, but people that might think they're really not interested in a nature preserve, a reason for them to come out here and see how beautiful it is and what it has to offer. So to get them out there and, dip their toes in and find out, hey, maybe I am a little more interested in nature and learning about it. So from the charrette, there were 3 concepts that were developed, and I'll give you a brief overview of it, but kind of the key takeaway is when we get to the preferred plan, you'll notice there's pieces that came from each of it. And this is common in our process, and that's why we do the different alternatives, so people can consider different layouts and different elements that are on the site, and then how they all work together. So this one, the Nature Center, is located essentially where the clubhouse is today. So it's on top of that hill, kind of overlooking the valley of Eagle Creek. It included boardwalk over the existing wetland. It includes expanding the wetland. It included outdoor classrooms. Those are the purple pink dot that you see. Also includes a network of pathways. This one, again, does have those ecological zones that were in that proposed ecological map. This one also includes a tree arbor, so those circles that are close to the nature center down in this area. And the tree gallery is like an arbor. It would be less natural and native massings, but still the native plants, but it could be used as like an educational outdoor classroom where those trees are identified. Concept B, again, utilized the entrance drive that comes in, the existing location of the nature center. And I will say A and B, when we were looking at them, we were considering, are we utilizing the existing structure or is this a brand new structure? So at that point, we were still working through that. And you'll notice with this location, it could be either of those. This one included this light blue path is a paved path that kind of sits on top of the hill that would be accessible. It included a cross-country course, a 5K cross-country course that goes throughout the site. And again, really relied heavily on those ecological zones. B had a unique element, and we called it White Oak Commons. When you first drive into the site, there's this huge, beautiful old oak tree. So it's named after that white oak that everyone will pass by. But it would be like a restaurant event center in a very small scale and very in context. And I'll show you some examples of what that might look like. So it might be a farm to table restaurant. It could be some outfitters that might have fishing poles for people to rent, or skis for cross-country skiing that people could rent there. And then concept C took a totally new look at, okay, let's put the nature center in a different place. So it's located up here along one of the ponds, which would mean a new building. And hit a button. Oh. Sorry about that. You don't want to see it blue. And then it did include a formal alley, a tree alley that would tie it back towards the entrance. There was a big spiral overlook. We were utilizing the existing parking area. And again, that network of trails that would go throughout the site. A lot of these trails are utilizing the pathway of the old cart paths. They're torn up. They would need to be rebuilt, but a lot of these are also rustic trails. So they would just be a natural path. It wouldn't be paved. From that came the preferred concept. And again, you'll see there's pieces that came from each. We kept the nature center in the current location. With this, we're planning on proposed new building, and we'll talk a little bit about that and how we came to that. The 5K cross-country course is still included on this layout. It's utilizing the existing barns that are up near County Road 900 East, using those as a maintenance area for the Parks Department, with some much needed storage. It does include a primary entrance off of State Road 32, which that property is now owned by the school corporation. So we would need to work with the school corporation. We started, Jared has actually started conversations with the school corporation. And then a secondary entrance, which would come off the county road. The boardwalk is incorporated in this one. And then another element is a canopy walk. And then phase 2, like I said, is the White Oak Commons. They're towards the entrance at 900 East. This just identifies those habitats that were, again, on that proposed map, and to show how those work with the different elements that we have on the site. With the concept that we ended up with, you'll notice it's kind of a heavier touch on the land with that White Oak Commons near 900. And as you get closer to Eagle Creek, it's a much lighter, much more of the natural areas, and less of an impact from people. So there is a network of trails. The trail that, again, is sort of on top of the hill, is a paved trail. It would be accessible so that kids going out to the classrooms, you would have that accessible route with a paved trail network. And then that highlights the 5K cross-country course. We talked about having meets out here and decided there's too much impact that come with cross-country meets, even smaller meets, even if it's just a couple of schools. So this would just be used for practice. And just for, runners or walkers that would like that 3-mile loop. This is a close-up of White Oak Commons, again, showing you what that might look like, a big green area in the center, a pergola that goes around the outside of it. You could have an event barn, you could have a restaurant, and outfitters, like we mentioned. So this gives you an idea of what we're thinking. When we say event barn, I'm sure there's a lot of different scales and things you could think of. So this gives you more of the character or the aesthetic that we're thinking of for what that might look like. So very in character with the site. But again, the idea that someone might come out for this quaint, unique restaurant, thinking they have no desire to get any further back in the site and see how beautiful it is and really be drawn back into the site and the nature center. So the Nature Center, which will be the focus of the site, again, they're on top of the hill with that great view. Incorporated with that, we've got, and I did it again, I was going to. We have the nature play, a nature-inspired play. And then behind, we also have treehouse and that canopy walk. So it's like a boardwalk, but in the top of the trees. And then it's punctuated by tree houses and wildlife blind, which is where people can sit and not be seen by the animals, but actually watch the animals. A nice boardwalk that goes over the wetland. We'll expand the wetland and do some reforestation, but there's also an amphitheater there at the bottom of the hill, where classrooms or programs could be conducted as a part of the Nature Center. Gives you an idea of what we're thinking when we're talking about that canopy walk and the tree houses. So another play opportunity, but another opportunity for just viewing nature as you're out there on the site. Art is an important part of the master plan, but it's, art in nature. So it's more specific to the nature in context with the site. Turn it back over to Sam, and he's going to talk a little bit about the 3 options we looked at for the Nature Center and then how we ended up where we ended up.
We developed 3 parallel programs for what a potential nature center could be, agnostic of where it would be located on the site, just to understand, again, looking at what the opportunities and constraints of the existing building present to us, which I won't get into the data on the screen, but because it's small, I'll be available for questions later. But on the left-hand column is looking at utilizing the existing 9,000 square foot center, and then 2 new construction options on the right, a 12,000 square foot and a 5,000 square foot option. And really the intent of this exercise was just to work with stakeholders in the community and the town to understand the wants and needs of what a nature center would present, and the variety of scales that those sizes could accommodate. So as an example, the smaller 5,000 square foot option would have a potential meeting space for 49. The larger 12,000 square foot would have a meeting space for 149. And then all the other program, whether it be exhibit space or classroom space, would scale up accordingly. So we started to jump into some of what the organization of the program of a nature center could be, just to get further input from the stakeholders in that charrette process, and help to communicate and help people understand the scale of what we're talking about with the 9,000, 5,000 and 12,000 square foot options. Sustainability is a lens that we always cast over any decisions that we're making or recommending, whether it be salvaging and preserving an existing building or recommending new construction. So total life cycle cost is an important way to help us understand that. So again, a lot of data on this sheet, but I'll use it to say that we looked at what if new construction options were built to a net zero energy standard. The bottom chart is showing what the annual cumulative energy cost would potentially be with the 3 options, showing that the top orange bar would be renovating the existing structure with residential style equipment, which is low cost, and what was on it to begin with would be significantly higher ongoing 30-year energy costs. And then rolling that into the chart on the top, which is showing the overall initial spend upfront costs of what the 3 options would be, plus the cumulative energy use. And again, presuming that the existing structures are have substandard quality and nearing the end of their usable life, even with retrofit, assuming that 15 or 20 years down the line would be the end of their useful life, and there would be a significant spend to replace them at that time after an initial immediate spend for a nature center program to begin with. We also did a precedent study of other comparable scale nature centers throughout the country. So looking at, again, the programs that are in each of those and the scale, quality of construction, sustainability aspirations and standards that each of these have had. One element that takeaway learning from these is that there is a way to potentially phase construction to create a building that is meets the needs initially, and then is able to adapt and grow as the community grows, as more funds might become available. So there are a few: Columbus, Ohio, at 12,000 square feet, and Claremont, Kentucky, on the lower scale that would be good precedents to do a field trip to at some point and study and see the impact that these centers are having on their communities. I'll hand it back over to Tricia to give an overview of what we learned from the public input sessions after all of the previous information was made available to the community.
So we had a project website after we came up with those preferred concepts, and then really, hopefully some of you saw that, really went into detail for the site, telling a little bit about what those elements were going to look like. The project website, which was specific to Carpenter Nature Preserve, had close to 8,000 total visits and about 1,300 unique users. So that tells you a lot of people were going back to look at it again, to see it more than once, or maybe a couple people in the same household. But that's 8,000 visits is a lot of eyes on the plan. We did have a survey that was a part of it. So we asked a few questions, and there were 170 survey responses. So if you were fewer people decided to answer those questions than look and see what was there, which is pretty normal. So we're going to show you just a few of the questions we asked in the master plan itself. In the appendix, we'll have the full, I think there were 8 or 10 questions. We'll have those full results in the appendix. But this question was, what are you most excited to see? And they could pick anything. They weren't limited to just picking 3. But what we heard was trails, pathways, and boardwalk. I'm sure you're all surprised to hear that. Seems like every community outreach we have, we hear that. Another one that was very high in the responses was the nature center, that people are looking forward to that nature center with the ideas that we were presenting. And then ecological habitats was also very high. So these 2 questions are, how would you like the town to pay for acquiring the property? And then the second one is, how would you like the town to pay for constructing the park, basically? And what we saw was pretty much a mix. Again, everybody could pick whatever they want. There weren't any limits on that. So this is just interesting to see. The largest was combination of private and public funds. That's the yellow. And then the purple, which was donations or fundraising, which again is something pretty common when we ask this question. Wanted to know where people that were answering the questions, where they lived. The green is Zionsville, the urban district. So most of them were in Zionsville. And then we had one that was very specific, Whitestown, smack up against Zionsville. So I think they could have been honorary Zionsville. So master plan cost opinion, I always have to put the little asterisks when I put the master plan. It is still very general. You know, we haven't designed the building. We haven't designed the width of the pathways, you know, those specifics, the utilities, those haven't been designed. We have an idea of the range that it might cost to do these. So this gives you an idea of what that range is. And I'll give you a brief overview of it, and then I'm going to throw it back to Jared, and he can tell you about next steps. But so phase 1 would be acquisition and construction documents for that first phase. Phase 2, and there could be phase 2A, B, C. You know, you really can break this down however you need to once you get to that point. But it is approximately $4 to $6 million. That includes the bigger nature center, that 12,000 square foot nature center, all the roads and the parking, all the outdoor classrooms, that canopy walk and the tree houses, rehabbing the bridges that are out there. They need quite a bit of work to utilize the land on the other side of Eagle Creek. Playground, shelters, and utilities. So all that is included, but it also includes stream bank enhancement, wetland, and reforestation.
Sorry, did you say that includes the nature center or does not?
No, it does not.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I thought I
sorry.
heard that wrong.
Nature blinds. Phase 3 would be the nature center. And that could be anywhere from 7 to 10 million, but it does include the nature center, the amphitheater, and the boardwalk. And again, that's a 12,000 square foot nature center. When it actually becomes time to design it, that could be much smaller, could even be bigger, could be designed to be scaled. And then the White Oak Commons, again, 5 to 10 million. That's a big range because again, it could look so different from one barn out there for events to multiple restaurants, arbor, an event for weddings. You know, just the scale of it really could vary. So I'll turn it back over to Jared and let you talk about next steps.
Just a question. Each phase is independently budgeted. So aggregately, you're talking $20 to $30 million for the 4 phases.
Yes. So looking at the numbers, you know, this is a legacy project, very similar to our rail trail, which began in 1992. 2022, we're finally looking at acquiring the final parcels and completing our section of the rail trail. But throughout this 30 years of the rail trail, people have been able to enjoy it along the way, and it just becomes a better investment for our community. So very similar to the Carpenter Nature Preserve, step 1, we have to acquire the land. With the land in our pocket, we can begin to work with all the tools in our tool belt. We can begin to partner with the Zionsville Parks Foundation, who are very eager to begin their first capital campaign with this project. So currently, as Nancy Carpenter is both the chair of the Zionsville Parks Foundation, as well as the owner of the land, there's a conflict there for raising funds for this project now. But once the land is town property, we can begin fundraising for sites and features on the site, or as well as just the nature center itself. So kind of this phasing allows for us to acquire the land, begin the construction documents. Phase 2, open the park up very similar to Starkey Park. So going out there to enjoy nature, building on that support and that institution within the community, having a couple of bells and whistles with the classrooms, the nature blinds, and the restroom. And then just beginning to build that emotional investment in the community of what this preserve could become. And then, as the master plan indicated, partnering with public and private funds to complete this vision and have a nature center in the future. So happy to answer any questions about the master planning process for this project.
So legacy projects are great. I don't want to leave this town with legacy debt. What I think is most interesting to me, I mean, it all looks great, right? And I think in a public process, if you ask people, do you want this? They're going to say, absolutely, this looks great. I mean, I see that. I think that looks great. But then you see the price, and that price is going to keep going up as the time to fund it goes up, right? So if you don't do that nature center for 8 years, that 7 to 10 million suddenly becomes 12 to 15 million. What I want to make sure that we aren't doing is we aren't just chasing shiny new objects, because we have an overall park plan, master park plan. This park, while beautiful, is sort of what I would consider on the fringes of Zionsville population today. You know, if there's an ask for money, I want to see how that ask for money impacts the current overall parks master plan, and that we aren't robbing that master plan of future funding because we've put it all in on this. So, you know, whether it's something like golf course improvements, you know, certainly we could use a new clubhouse there, or other things that may be coming that the Parks Board has decided we need. I just want to make sure that in 5 years, we can't buy it. We can't build a playground. We can't make an improvement in the new Overly Warman Park opening Friday because we've done this. If we can, it's not an issue. But looking at bonding capacity, current budget, all those sort of things, I think that's got to be part of the sell, at least to me and to this community, is to making sure we can afford that. And I'm sure you've already thought through that because you've been nodding a lot. So that's good. But I wanted to make sure we're on the same page there.
Absolutely. So, you know, part of when I was interviewing for this position, John Stair asked, you know, what's more important, continuing to develop a park system or taking care of what you have? And I answered, well, that's 50-50. You have to maintain what you have and the brand you have while you expand. And John let me know that I was wrong, and it's actually 100%. So it is within our priorities to expand into northern Zionsville. We have no park presence there at this time as we leave kind of the urban core. But I completely agree. This has to be balanced with the large park system. And these questions, or this information, will be transported into the 5-year master plan, which we are currently kicking off now.
Yeah, that's I think the important piece, right? Because if I saw the examples given, other communities that have done this, you know, it was Columbus, it was Pittsburgh, it was San Antonio. Now there was the one in Kentucky. That's the one I'm more interested in, because those other communities are 30x, 40x our size, which means they have similar size budgets. Again, I just don't want to make sure we put all of our chips in that one basket. And beautiful as it may be, it starts straining other parts of the system.
Absolutely.
That was going to be my question. So what's the operating cost if phase 1 happened today? So like, are you going to have a full-time person out there maintaining it? I mean, what's the operating cost? And then what would be the operating cost, let's just say after phase 3? Is it going to have some sort of break-even point through what kind of money?
Absolutely. So phase 1 with acquisition, our operating costs would just be the maintenance of the land. So phase 1 truly is just acquiring it as the town, and then doing our due diligence to keep that property safe. You know, at this point, it wouldn't be open to the public. There would still be the old structures on site that would need demolished, as well as the cart paths are in disrepair. So that is truly just acquiring the land and beginning to formalize those construction documents. So we could fold that within current operations. Now, adding 214 acres to our park system would require additional personnel or additional contract services to keep up with that investment. So as we open this up to a park, we would surely need to request additional staffing and support to keep up with the operations and safety of that park, as we do with all of our parkland.
Would that be phase 1, or you mean phase 2?
That would be phase 2. So phase 1 is simply getting this property in perpetuity as town property. So owning that land, you know, having that large of a segment of Eagle Creek in our park system, which we currently have 7 parks along Eagle Creek. It's been a mission to continue to invest in the banks of Eagle Creek to improve our drinking water, and reduce erosion throughout Starkey. And now we're looking at Overly Warman as well. So this would be a nice capstone to that legacy of investment in our own drinking water in Eagle Creek. On top of that, the 214 acres of green space, which we could improve habitat. So as development continues, wildlife is going to continue to be pushed north because that's the rural section. Already, we've heard of residents that are seeing more fox and more coyotes as Holiday Farms has come online. So that is only going to continue to happen as we continue to expand north into Union Township. So this park, 214 acres, at some point in the future is going to be a green oasis, whereas everything else could, 50, 100 years from now be developed. So the importance of having this staple within our community is only going to become more and more critical as we continue to grow. So getting back to your question, infrastructure, we will need additional resources to take care of a park, but within the phase 2 step, that's very similar to taking care of Starkey Park or Turkey Foot. It's passive recreation. It's our nature center staff going out and programming the site, but it's no true investment of facilities on the scale of a nature center yet. Then once funds are available and resources are available, we look at phase 3, and that's when the nature center actually comes online. And, the nature center has been a part of this community for the past 20 years, and it has been within school facilities, now within the library facility, but always the backbone of our nature programming. We're still seeing 1,400 people walk through the door of it every single month now that it's in the library. So a highly visible, highly desired asset in the community. And this would be the capstone of that, providing the permanent location for that foundation that we've built up over the last 20 years. And White Oaks Common, that could happen 50 years from now, that could happen, that could fall off and never happen. That is kind of just, in this process, we were asked to dream and what could possibly happen. And White Oaks Common is an opportunity to generate additional revenue for the site, to reduce the support it would need from taxpayer funds, and just create a new amenity that might draw someone else to the site. So we're not really worried about White Oak Commons yet. That is something that would be wonderful to get to someday. But phases 1, 2, and 3 are kind of what are on our purview for this beginning of this legacy project.
Jared, I don't know that I would discount phase 4 as sort of like a nice to have or the end goal. I mean, if you look at the survey, sort of, you think of public-private partnership, right? Everyone expects private to pay for stuff, but they're not going to pay for, pathways or shelters. What they're going to pay for is something like that where they can then make money. So if that's a way to jumpstart things, because it is a private event center that utilizes that space and then goes towards some rent funding the rest of the stuff, that's the kind of public-private partnership I think that works. And so I would certainly encourage that, as well as the foundation that's been set up. The more that comes from that, and the less that comes from us, makes it both easier and quicker to do, right?
Completely fair.
Jared, do you know what the bonding capacity of the Parks Department is right now, or the parks?
We began that conversation. So based on kind of preliminary history, it looks like we're right around 10 million for the park board in bonding capacity. I think it's also important to note that the Land Water Conservation Fund, which is funded in perpetuity through the state, that's actually a federal program, that is up to $500,000, and we could be eligible for that every 2 years. And just the scope and scale of this type of project, it checks the majority of their criteria for each funding cycle. So with the actual acquisition, we wouldn't have to spend $1 on that match, and we would have $500,000 right there to invest in the park on day one. And then 2 years later, we could apply again and have another $500,000. And that's just one very large grant program. And again, it's important to remember, we do have a foundation. While it is a young foundation, they are very eager and in line with their mission to fundraise for this site and specifically the Nature Center.
So what I would, just throwing this out there, it looks like, once we have phase 1 and phase 2 completed, essentially we could start using the park, prior to phase 3 being implemented. My thought on this, I understand the conflict of interest with Ms. Carpenter being both the owner and the president of the foundation not being able to raise. And I do believe we can raise a lot of this money through people that want to commemorate their family legacy, if you will, over for the next 100 years or however long, this goes on. But, so my initial thought is bond for the acquisition and then start the fundraising to fund phase 2, because then you've got things that people can put their family name on, as well as businesses put their names on, because that's, you love to make a donation, but you also want to see your name there, and you want your, I'm thinking, it'd be cool if my grandkids, walked by and saw their family name on something that was in this park. I'm obviously a big supporter of this. I also, I want to be helpful. I want to be a part of it, but I'm also very, I want to do it in a fiscally responsible way. So I want to help. I want to be a part of it. Anything I can do to be a part of it. I will probably be one that pushes back on the financial aspect, but the actual park itself, I want to make that happen.
Thank you very much for saying that. And I completely agree with what you just said. So just a smaller example, we began the memorial program within our park system for benches and trees. And it was so successful in year 1, we actually had to sunset it in the fall because we just couldn't take on any more benches. We were able to look at where we needed them and open it back up. And again, we receive applications every few months. So there is, a strong support of our park system within Zionsville. And I completely agree. As we offer those opportunities to not only leave their legacy, but build a new one, I think people will come.
I think we all echo Councilor Trailer's sentiments. The price tag is, obviously something that we really have to figure out. You mentioned this a couple of times. So the foundation is up and going. Obviously, some conflict of interest. I think you need to fix that quickly. Do you not see the foundation as a part of phase 1? And because you mentioned, they're ready to go once it's acquired. So it sounds like you don't believe that the foundation is going to be able to be instrumental until phase 2. That wasn't, when we started the foundation and when we first visited this park, about a year ago, I was excited, and I thought that the foundation piece, to Brian's point, there are a lot of people I think would want to make a donation to this, but I pictured that part and parcel to this $4.5 million acquisition and not after the fact.
Right. Because of that conflict, it would be after the acquisition, just because acquisition is so directly tied to both, to Carpenter on both sides of that equation. But as Councilor Trailer mentioned, every item within it, building the site could be something that could be part of their capital campaign and receiving fundraising. So the foundation does receive regular donations, and they are assisting us park system wide, so they wouldn't be just completely focused on the Carpenter Nature Preserve. So we are working with them. They've actually sponsored our summer camp program and provided scholarships to 2 families. So 5 camps were paid for completely by the foundation. We are working out at the golf course to transition some of those rough areas into native plantings and pollinator gardens to provide a little bit of habitat that doesn't interfere with play and reduces the maintenance on the site for our teams. So they are looking at the holistic approach until they can really set their sights on the preserve and begin capital raising for that.
What would be your preferred suggestion to fund the $4.5 million acquisition if you wanted to do that in the next 12 months?
So I think we do have the bonding capacity to not only afford the acquisition of this, but also have funds left over should another opportunity arrive. So again, to Councilor Garrett's point, not putting all of our eggs in this one basket, still being able to provide for the rest of our park system. So I think that's important. We're not stretching ourselves too far, but we can put the kickstand up and allow the foundation and public-private partnerships to really take off once the land is owned by the town.
Something else to consider is, the conflict of interest. I completely understand that and I don't want to have to, cut the Carpenters out of any aspect of this because they're so, they're such a cornerstone to this happening. But one thing to consider is to get rid of that conflict of interest is we have to acquire the property. We could bond for that acquisition, and if the flavor of the council is, okay, now we don't approve any additional funding until now we've got the opportunity to raise funds. You can raise funds, pay down that bond to the point that the council would want, whether that's off or just pay down a couple of million or whatever. Those are options too. I think, obviously step one, while, the Carpenters are committed to saving this property for the town, also understand I don't want to take advantage of their generosity any longer than we have to. So I think if we could get the acquisition done, then kind of everything else it's a legacy project, everything else time's on our side.
I'm just curious, obviously, the methodology, and you had the website up, and obviously, you had 8,000 people checking it out, not quite 200 people weighed in. I'm not surprised by the results. Obviously, there wasn't a price tag on that. What I'd be super curious moving forward is what's the will of the entire community of Zionsville to bond $5 million for this property? I don't know. I don't know if that's part of your next part of the phase of surveying, a financial component to see if people have an appetite for this.
Absolutely, yeah. So we were hoping to kind of suss that out through the community survey. It's there, but as you mentioned, that is a small portion of the entirety of Zionsville. So certainly capturing that in the next 5-year master plan, but to not sit on our hands and actually begin the bonding process, since that takes a while, I think we will look at providing some opportunity for additional community input on the bonding process.
Jared, it says acquisition and construction docs. What are the construction docs?
So that would be for the infrastructure, surveying the land.
So this right here, or additional over and above what's already been studied here?
So master planning level, is at that 30,000 foot level. And this would actually get in the minutia of the site to make it more appropriate, studying the topography, studying some of the other limitations of the site, what utilities might actually cost. But again, those construction documents would only be tied to the infrastructure. So the roads, the parks, the restroom. And then we would, have construction documents made when we are ready to move forward with the nature center. And again, when we're ready to move forward with White Oaks Commons. So
an estimated cost on that?
On the construction documents, it's usually about 10% of the total cost. So if we look at phase 2, that's around 400 or 600,000 for the construction documents for everything within that.
Thank you.
And one thing we haven't talked about as another tool in our tool belt is the impact fee, which we receive from each development and house that comes into town. So historically, the park system has sat on those, unfortunately. So we do have a large number of impact fees that we do need to identify projects for. One of those being a community room, which could be satisfied within the nature center. But there are also other things, shelters, restroom buildings. We can look at all of that with the previous impact fee study, as well as the current one that was just adopted this year.
White Oak Commons, how many people would that hold for the gathering area? I know in Boone County, we don't have very many areas that can house larger groups. And I think that's something that I've heard from my constituents is where can we throw a big party?
Absolutely. I believe that has some ability to be scaled as well. You saw that in the center, there was a large green space that could obviously become a part of a structure if needed. I think that barn is very interchangeable about its actual dimensions. So I completely agree. We now began shelter reservations, and we reserved quite a few shelters throughout the year, as well as Lincoln Park, which is kind of the wedding destination in the middle of Zionsville. And that is booked almost every weekend of the summer for these events. So certainly there are a number of people that would like to be able to have their reception at the same location as their ceremony and be able to accommodate medium-sized parties. So I completely agree. There's a need right now for that.
As we look into things like White Oak Commons, nothing to do about here. I doubt you've looked at how it affects the neighboring areas, but because it's proposed in the southwest corner, I want us to keep in mind how it impacts neighbors around there. I don't know what it looks like as far as demographics, not demographics, but the population around that area looks like. But as we deal with some of the other issues around other facilities in the town and the impact that it's caused to neighboring areas, I want to be mindful when we move forward that of things like White Oak Commons that's going to be on the edge of the property and what it does noise wise to the surrounding areas.
That's a fantastic point. We've actually began conversations with the neighbors of the site. Originally proposed was a spiral hill, which would have been the kickoff point for the 5Ks or the cross-country meets. And, there was a lot of concern about a spiral hill that looked directly into their pools and their backyards. So that concept was kind of scrapped completely. And through feedback, we've learned that, this site won't be a good spot for those meets altogether. So we are certainly at a point where we can still change plans to best accommodate not only our neighbors, but the community. So we'll most certainly have those conversations. And we have spoke with them about White Oak Commons and kind of what that would be in initial conversations. So.
Any other questions for Jared?
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Jared.
Up next on the agenda is a presentation regarding the Central Indiana Regional Development Authority. Noblesville Mayor Chris Jensen is going to present. Welcome, Mayor.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's always wonderful to sit and listen to other communities grapple with the same challenges that Noblesville grapples with. If we all had all the money coming out the trees that we plant, right, we'd be in better shape. So kudos to you. It's great to be with you in Zionsville this morning. I was telling Mayor Styron that I came over about a year ago and had lunch with her at Rosie's, which is not the original Rosie's. The original Rosie's in downtown Noblesville. Side commentary. Still, the ooey gooey cookies are just as good over here. But it was about a year ago, and so I haven't been back since. But then I had the pleasure of attending, not pleasure, I attended a funeral in Zionsville on Friday and then played baseball. I did and my son on Saturday and Sunday. So this is 4 days in a row to be in your wonderful community. And I spent a little bit of money too while I was here. So thank you for allowing me to be here this morning to talk a little bit about the proposed Central Indiana Regional Development Authority. This is really as Mayor Styron teed up well, a continuation of really a decades-long conversation around regionalism. Roughly 10 years ago, with the leadership of Mayor Fadness of Fishers, and at the time Mayor Cook of Westfield, really started talking a little bit about not so much acting individually, but looking at a regional approach to our Central Indiana community. And the CICEO group was formed. That group meets on a monthly basis downtown Indianapolis for lunch to discuss a whole host of issues. Most recently last week, we're discussing development and cost of development, of which you are seeing major changes in as well, and meeting with different groups to just get our heads around different ideas and share struggles, challenges, opportunities that we all face. In 2020, the Indiana General Assembly, our good friends down there, passed a piece of legislation allowing Central Indiana to form a new RDA, or Regional Development Authority. There have been many attempts in the past to form an RDA. I can tell you, I think I've been asked many times, why hasn't this happened until now? I think all too often, in Central Indiana in particular, our individual communities, whether it be Zionsville or any Hamilton County community, Johnson County, et cetera, have strong economic development engines on their own. And so oftentimes to get us around one table, around one vision can be an incredible challenge. What the town of Zionsville faces on a daily basis is different than we face in Noblesville and Greenwood and Shelbyville, for example. So in the last 18 months, we decided to take a different approach. we decided to start with our governmental structure to get everyone on the same page from a governmental body standpoint, then convene going forward and discuss some of these regional opportunities and a vision for the region. We didn't know at the time that the Ready Grant opportunity would be a perfect opportunity for us to start with. You may recall about a little over a year ago, the General Assembly allotted $500 million for Ready Grant funding for communities around the state of Indiana to apply on a regional basis for community development projects focused on quality of life, projects focused on housing and increasing the population of the state of Indiana, which is a mission for not only each one of our communities as we are forced with major workforce challenges, but the state as a whole. You may recall we formed a partnership along the White River region, of which Zionsville, and people ask the question of how Zionsville snuck in there, you are actually a part of the watershed for the White River region. So Zionsville was part of our region, and we gathered together. And over the course of really 60 days, I thought really moved the needle forward and a discussion around regionalism. We were able to come together exhaustively to put together a list of projects to apply for the Ready Grant funding. We applied for a $50 million opportunity. I can tell you when we went down to pitch our project, and Mayor Steinman was there that day down in Indianapolis at the Delara factory, we learned a lot of lessons that day. While I thought we had an incredibly strong presentation around why the state should invest $50 million in the White River region, we also saw other regions around the state, whether it be Southwest Indiana, down in Evansville with their One Southern Indiana, or Northwest Indiana or Northeast Indiana, were already very cohesive in their approach. They had already formed RDAs in their area with staff on staff helping to guide those conversations. Not that we didn't have a great cohesive presentation, but we were doing it with our existing staff amongst city staff and town staff going forward. And so we saw an obvious shortcoming that we had of Central Indiana by not having a formed RDA in place. As you all well know, every region in the state of Indiana was awarded funding for the Ready Grant opportunity. We were awarded $20 million and are currently going through the exhaustive process of trimming down our $50 million ask. I can tell you, while Noblesville took the lead in the overall Ready application, our project was cut from the list. It's nothing like a little backhanded compliment from our friends at the state, but that's okay. We continue to push forward. Zionsville does have a funded opportunity. Mayor Siren mentioned that earlier. Kind of working on those final dollar amounts here for the next several months to see that going forward. But we learned from that experience that the fact that we don't have an established RDA was really at a detriment. And we were told by the state of Indiana and promised by the governor, you may have heard him say that his plan is to put another, hopefully $500 million in next year's legislative budget to fund Ready 2.0. And we don't want to make the same mistakes we made with round one. So we decided the time was now to push forward on the development of a regional development authority. So what you will have before you in 2 weeks, and the way this works is every town or city in the 9-county region with a population over 5,000 people. I counted last night, there are 29 cities and towns and then 9 counties that will be able to adopt into this new RDA going forward. What each town or city will do is adopt a resolution per state statute, which requires 2 meetings, and then an ordinance which requires 2 meetings, and then a resolution opting yourself into the Regional Development Authority. Now you may ask, what's the cost? What's the hang up? What's the hook? I get that all the time. There's currently no funding attached to the existing RDA. Other RDAs around the state have different taxing authority. For example, this RDA does not have that. I think long-term, there'll be a conversation amongst members of that RDA to look for additional funding sources for it. I think the ability to hire staff going forward will help take the focus of the RDA out of each individual town or city and put it in a centralized unit that will require some funding long-term, but we're not to that discussion yet. I can tell you most of the communities in the RDA region already pay an existing fee to the Indy Chamber Partnership. For example, there's been some discussions of taking some funding from that group and placing it in this RDA to hire some staff, but we're not to that point going forward. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm sure those conversations will be forthcoming. The idea here is to have a full-time group of people hired by all the Central Indiana region, constantly looking at the state and federal government for funding opportunities. In particular, at the federal level, I've never seen a money-making machine and printing press like they have in Washington, D.C. I don't think we have one in Noblesville. I don't know, maybe Zionsville does. But the amount of dollars flowing from Washington, D.C., of which I have a lot of questions on, but that's a whole nother conversation, is a plenty currently. And I think it's only to our city's benefit and our region's benefit to have folks looking for those funding opportunities, because we know Central Indiana is a huge economic driver for the state of Indiana. So again, the goal here is to get everyone in the same group in the same region, rowing towards the same mission, and then get everyone around a table to start looking at long-term opportunities. We know ahead of us, Ready 2.0 will be coming up next year, but that will just be hopefully one piece of a much larger puzzle as grant dollars continue to flow from the federal government and the state government. Having a group of people focused on the different needs of all of our different communities, I think will be a huge benefit to us going forward. I can tell you to date, the city of Noblesville and the city of Fishers have both adopted this resolution. The town of McCordsville and Hancock County has as well. And Marion County and Indianapolis will be taking it up later this month as well going forward. So the first swath of people will be those in the White River redevelopment, the READY project. In order to receive our READY grant dollars, every community needs to be in an RDA. So we will start with those who received dollars from the White River Ready grant application. Other communities in the 9-county region were a part of a different RDA for application for Ready dollars. Example, Shelbyville teamed up with some of those communities on the I-74 corridor to apply for their Ready grant dollars. So they're ineligible as of right now to join our RDA until they spend their current Ready dollars. Once they do that, they will leave the RDA that they're in and they will join the Central Indiana Regional Development Authority going forward. So again, I think this is an incredible opportunity for all of us for once to come together on a positive step forward to make ourselves ready for additional funding coming forward. And I would ask for your consideration of this here in 2 weeks when it comes before you. And I'm here today, again, just to really answer any questions that you have regarding it. Seeing none, thanks so much. I'm just kidding.
So sounds good. No problems. I'm assuming being in an RDA with communities where we may be competing with projects on, or maybe setting our own economic agenda for what drives us, being an RDA, if that conflicts with the RDA's mission, doesn't prevent us from setting our own destiny for how we want to drive economic development locally, correct?
I think that's a really great point. Thank you for mentioning it. The main vision and point of this regional RDA is not to compete with one another. We're going to have that every single day amongst us, which I think is great and healthy. This RDA is really aimed at competing with Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee, Denver, Colorado, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think that the local competition will happen every single day. This is more designed of a big regional projects. I use the example like the Amazon 2.0 project that was several years ago that was going to have a huge impact on Central Indiana. Those are the type of projects this region will go after. In terms of economic development, local economic development will still be up to every city and town in our community because, again, to your point, I don't need a 9-county region telling me what's best for Noblesville. Thus, you don't need that for Zionsville as well.
How much does the state get involved or help with this? I know that statutorily they set it up, but if you think about or have read the news about the state buying or allegedly buying 5,000 acres in Boone County, north of Lebanon, who knows for what, but you talk about competing regionally, right? Columbus, Ohio just got that Intel factory. I suspect that's probably something that's set up similarly. Do state initiatives that are sort of tangentially related to the RDA, are they sort of folded in or cooperative, or are they, the state's the state and really has nothing to do with what we're doing?
They will be folded in, especially I think the state is looking for those big $200 million type Intel projects. They will, if something like that were to come about, they would immediately lean on the RDA for that conversation. As you and I know, Josh, that at the end of the day, a huge Intel project, while may benefit directly the tax base of Boone County, is going to impact the workers of Hamilton County and the residents of Hamilton County and Clinton County and surrounding counties as well. So projects of that size, of that scope, involving the 5,000 acres that you alluded to that we've read about, will be folded in directly with this RDA and its vision.
Very good.
I noticed in the IBJ article a couple weeks ago, there's no, you mentioned this before, there's no projects or anything that you guys have outlined. This is just simply an opportunity to be prepared for that, should it come down the pipe.
Yeah, I think in the past, some of the trip ups there have been too many, if you will, a cart in front of the horse conversation. There's been conversations around regional. I use this example lightly, but a commuter tax, for example, Indianapolis, I know has discussed that in the past. Mayor Hogsett has. Nothing will tick off a 9-county region more than a commuter tax conversation, and rightfully so. So I think our goal here is, why don't we get ourselves organized as an actual governmental body and then start tackling some of those regional conversations. I think we have the ability to do that now. We know there are regional dollars coming down the pike. So why we wouldn't get ourselves organized first and then move towards a regional conversation, and knowing at the same time too that each community may have different regional visions for themselves. It's not going to be everyone chasing one pile of money on Ready 2.0. Ready 2.0, for example, may make sense for 5 communities in the Central Indiana RDA, and 24 others may not make sense, and they may be going after a different federal grant program, for example. The whole point is that every single day we're looking at these opportunities and what dollars make sense for what communities.
And we have your staff has sent over ordinance and resolutions in the state statute. And Heather, I believe you were on that email. So counselors, we would certainly just, modify that to be specific to Zionsville and present that, if ready, at the next meeting in a couple weeks.
In the meantime, we stand ready. If there's any questions you have, President Plunkett has my number, Dr. Choi as well, call or text. I'm happy to have these conversations with you individually as well.
Sounds great. Any other questions?
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Appreciate the time. It's a beautiful drive this morning. Have a good day.
Come back for day 5.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Up next on the agenda is other matters. Are there any counselors that have any other matters they would like to discuss?
I got one quick thing.
Sure.
So the mayor mentioned this in her administration update, talking about what the county is doing with this jail project. About 5 years ago, give or take, the previous council and every local council, so Whitestown, Lebanon, Thorntown, went through a pretty exhaustive process of implementing a public safety lit. That's a 1% tax for all residents of the entire county that was to go towards to pay public safety. And it was needed. I voted for it. I stand by that. It helped with our police. It helped with our fire. We needed that funding, but 50% of that revenue goes to the county. The county council is now looking at another 0.2% income tax for this proposed jail project. And the justification is, well, it's only going to cost X amount of dollars, right? A family making $75,000 is only going to pay $56, whatever it may be. And I hate those justifications, because you start adding up a bunch of little taxes and they only start becoming a pretty big number. And so I agree with the mayor wholly that I think this needs more thinking through. I think this needs more public dialogue. I don't think that's a good way to spend $50-60 million. You look at, I'm sure everyone here has gotten their property tax assessments. Mine went up tremendously, which is great. My home is worth a lot more, but it's terrible because my property taxes are going to be a lot more as well. So people are already getting shocked by that. You've got inflation going on, and now you've got this proposed jail. I'm further concerned with the fact that I think Zionsville will bear a disproportionately larger share of this jail than what we will use it for. So I'm certainly encouraging our county council to rethink this. I'm certainly encouraging the members of that council that represent this town to really think if that is the right point here. I was glad that Mayor talked about that, and I welcome any of your thoughts on this as well. But I think we as a community should push back and see, are there better ways to do this? Are there cheaper ways to do this? Now we're being told we've got to do it right away because costs are going up. Well, are there other ways to do this as well? So I'm a little concerned what's going on there. I know we don't have a vote on it like we did on the public safety lit, but certainly I want to make sure this council has a voice on it, much like the mayor has weighed in as well on that as well. So that was my other matter.
And I totally agree with everything you just said. I just want to make one quick correction, because I know the folks out there in the public probably caught it and but it was, the lit tax was raised 0.5%. not
Oh, yeah.
1%.
Up to
So it's
1%.
raised to a total of 1.5%
Thank you.
from 1%.
Yep.
Yeah, but totally agree with everything.
Yeah, very true.
One last comment for the other matters. I just wanted to ask this council and the mayor to potentially join me in investigating additional ARPA disbursements to those specifically that had increased job duties due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dealing with keeping us connected for these meetings, whether it was dealing with public waste or the facilities. I just would like to see if there's an appetite for that with this council, as well as continue that discussion and hopefully in the next couple meetings, get something created where we could present that to the public and get some additional disbursements out. These are the people that work for the town that are the first responders to the first responders. So just wanted to throw that out there, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Counselor. We will have data to share with you to support Counselor Melton's suggestion. I agree wholeheartedly.
Very good. Any other matters or anything else from other counselors? No?
Move to adjourn.
First by Counselor Burke,
Second.
second by Counselor Culp. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular scheduled town council meeting scheduled for Monday, June 6, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana open door law. Thanks so much.